There you go.
Just over 3 weeks after a grand jury in St. Louis decided not to indict Officer Darren Wilson in the death of 18-year-old Michael Brown, there are still growing questions about not only what decision the grand jury reached, but about the grand jury process itself, how it works. And as Allman has discussed in several segments over the last week, no one calls that process more into question than the use of witness 40, whose testimony often seemed to be hard to believe. This is the witness who wrote in a journal entry, which she submitted to the grand jury, that she ended up on Canfield Drive that day, August 9th, the day of Michael Brown was shot, because she thought that morning, quote, "I'm going to take my random drive to fluorescent need to understand the black race better so I can stop calling blacks N-word and start calling them people," end quote. She also wrote that in the final moments of Michael Brown's life, quote, "The cop just stood there, and dang if that kid didn't start running right at the cop like a football player, head down," end quote. And it was that phrasing you might recognize that made her testimony a Sean Hannity Fox News favorite.
And then, quote, "He looked like a football player with his head down, charging at Officer Wilson. Charged at him," quote, and I'm reading, "like a football player with his head down charging." That Michael Brown, was charging like a football player full force on Officer Wilson. One witness described it as charging at Officer Wilson like a football player with his head down.
Yes, one witness did. But before that witness 40, ever appeared before the grand jury, she was interviewed by the FBI and represented the U.S. Attorney's Office. And they were very skeptical of her story. Part of their interview with her reads, question, "So you're posting racist things online and you're telling us, your account, and then there are videos that don't show your car and there's a map that shows you couldn't have left the way you left from." A witness responds, I don't know how I left." A question, "But obviously we find out what people's motivations are when you say you posted things online that are racist and you come in here and you tell us an account that supports Darren Wilson." So the St. Louis County prosecutor, Bob McCullough, let a witness testify, called him in, who had wrote those racist things, whose story made no sense, and who the FBI and U.S. Attorney in their questioning basically seemed not to believe, and that's the fairest reading we can give you. Now, a new bombshell report putting her testimony even further into question. The Smoking Gun website reporting they've identified witness 40, that she is a woman with, quote, "a criminal past who has a history of making racist remarks and once insinuated herself into another high-profile St. Louis criminal case with claims that police eventually dismissed as a complete fabrication." And that, quote, "in the weeks after Brown's shooting, but before she contacted police, she used her Facebook account to comment on the case." And to be clear, NBC News has not been able to independently confirm the Smoking Gun investigation. The FBI and the St. Louis Police Department declined to comment on this report, and the St. Louis County Prosecutor's Office didn't respond to our repeated requests on this matter. Joining us now, though, from the Smoking Gun, editor William Bastone, who co-wrote that report on witness 40. We're not endeavoring to give a proper name to this witness. We are endeavoring, though, to figure out why someone who was so non-credible was testifying. First, what did you learn? How did you verify the identity, the nature of this person's situation?
Sure. Well, what we did was we looked at all the 2 volumes of grand jury testimony. Keep in mind, she was there twice. Mm-hmm. She was there October 22nd and October 23rd, and then he called her back 10 days later. So what we did was we took a look at the unredacted portions that contained some kind of pedigree information, everything from the fact that she was divorced and had these criminal convictions, and she was adopted, founded a Facebook page that was in support of law enforcement officers, et cetera, et cetera. And then we basically went and spent a couple of days trying to connect individual people to those that fact pattern.
Right. So you did all that cross-referencing. Sure. You achieved this. You spoke with her in some capacity and corresponded with her.
Yes.
Does your reporting suggest that she did witness this incident?
No. I mean, this is a woman who was not there and fabricated this whole event. The thing that's kind of amazing is that she was first interviewed by the police. She told a version of the story to the cops, who then turned her over 5 weeks later to the prosecutors and the FBI and the United States Attorney's Office, the Justice Department. They had 5 weeks to vet this woman's story before they put her in for a 100-minute meeting with the FBI. 5 weeks. Everything that's in our story we gathered on her in 2 days, including her identity, from start to finish in 2 days.
This investigation?
Yes, our thing. We haven't been working on this since we started it 2 days ago, and then wrote the story over the weekend. So there was plenty of time to delve into her background and determine that this is an implausible story told by a woman who has a very checkered history, has been accused in the past by a local police department of fabricating material that she provided.
Do you think that record and the readily available racist remarks she made on Twitter, including on the day of the killing, I'm just asking a basic question, do you think that should have disqualified her from being put before the grand jury at all?
Well, this is what I think. Once you go in and you tell that story, I'm a journalist. I don't have subpoena power. I can't get her phone records. But when she told that story to the cops the first time, they could have disproven that story in 2 days. And I don't think anyone's set to do it. And now what do we have? We have a position where her account is now baked into the narrative
all over the
grand jury.
Exactly.
So it seems to have equal weight and sometimes more weight than other people who were in the grand jury, and she was nowhere to be found. She was nowhere near the place where Michael Brown got killed.
Right, and that's the reporting piece that's important, as you say. You did it quickly, but you did it thoroughly. William Bastone, The Smoking Gun, thank you for being here.
Sure.
We want to turn from the reporting piece to the justice piece. Benjamin Crump is the attorney for the family of Michael Brown. Good evening to you. What do you make of what you just heard and its significance in not the outcome of the grand jury decision, but whether the grand jury process here was normal, uniform, or fair?
Well, as we've said all along, we didn't think the grand jury process was normal or fair for Michael Brown to get justice. In fact, we think when you look at how they questioned this witness as opposed to how they questioned witnesses that supported Michael Brown surrendering, they heavily cross-examined, they heavily vetted Dorian Johnson and others. But this witness, as has been detailed in detailed account now, they, if you believe it at best, did it where it was so inconvenient for her to be on the stand for a long time, or if it was deliberate, they intentionally didn't want her on the stand long at all. And we think that this is certainly grounds for the judge to examine this and to set aside this grand jury's decision if this information is in fact correct.
Right, Mr. Crump, some of the racist writings and ramblings of this witness, I don't want to read on air. They're here and they're available to the public and on The Smoking Gun. In your view, though, when you say that, are you saying that Bob McCullough, the prosecutor here, his decision to put this kind of witness with this kind of history, credibility problems, criminal problems, and racism publicly put forward at that time, that itself means that Mr. McCullough basically abused his prosecutorial obligations?
We certainly think that an argument could be made, especially when you consider the fact that they should have known or could have easily ascertained that this witness had fabricated information before in another high-profile case, and the fact that if they would have vetted her properly, the police had the full resources for the state of Missouri behind them on this very, very high-profile case.
Mr. Crump, I hear you, and for people trying to make sense of this tonight, what are you going to do about it? Is there a filing or an action you're considering taking?
Absolutely. We've talked to his family about this all day, and we do believe that this should go before Judge Miche, and she should consider setting aside this grand jury's decision based on the information that was presented by this prosecutor, and especially this witness and other things.
I appreciate your perspective on it. I know how hard you've been working on it, and there are many legal calls that are tough calls that are in the gray. I got to tell you, looking at this one, looking at the writings, it doesn't seem gray. It seems fairly outrageous to put this kind of witness before a grand jury. Highly unusual. Mr. Benjamin Crump, thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you very much.
You bet. Next, we want to talk about my exclusive interview with Senator Al Franken. That's up ahead.
I was out for a bike ride. I didn't